Welcome back to Beernid 40K. Today we continue our look at every unit for the Space Marines faction in Kill Team with an examination of the builds available to us in the Scout datasheet. Just to start, you have three types of scouts to use as a starting point to build from. You have the regular scout, the Scout Gunner, letting you take up to 2 heavy weapons, or you have the Scout Sergeant. In addition, each of these has a lot of options for builds, and it can be kind of hard to know which scout does its best job in each situation, or what options just aren't that great in general. Now today, we're going to look at each of these in detail to help you get the most of your Marines. So, hit that like button, subscribe, and let's talk about getting the most from the Scouts, when you should play them, and how I suggest to build them. Now, at only 10 points base, the Scouts are the cheapest unit available to the Astartes, and even the basic Scouts come in a variety of builds. They have a 4-up save instead of the 3-up save you see on most Marine units, and they start life armed with a bolter, a bolt pistol, frag, and crack grenades. The bolter is the same strength 4 and 2 shots at half range you'd get on any Marine build, but you can switch that out for a few different things. A shotgun is option 1. The shotgun has a shorter 12-inch range, but it's an assault profile weapon, meaning you can still shoot even if you made an advanced move and ran with that model in the movement phase. You cannot do that with a bolt gun because the bolter is rapid fire type. So for me, that's always been a big selling point for the shotgun. So much of Kill Team seems to depend on the movement phase, so I've tended to take the more mobile shotgun scouts over the bolt gun scouts that have a bit longer range when I needed cheap bodies in my lists. The shotgun also gains +1 strength in half range, which brings it to strength 5 if your target is 6 inches or less away, which is very possible on these small Kill Team boards we're playing on, 22 by 30 inches. It's not too hard to be 6 inches away after an advanced move. This can come in handy as it would make you wound on 3s against toughness 4 opponents. Overall, I really like the shotguns, and in past formats where speed and numbers of bodies was a big part of the win condition, I would run quite a lot of these guys in some games. They did decently against the weaker Tyranid Hormagaunts, or cheap units like that people used to spam a lot of as they tried to hit that maximum of 20 models in competition. But with the move to hold and kill primaries in more recent competitive events, maxing bodies for the objective game is a less viable strategy, and you don't see this type of scout trying to counter that nearly as often as you used to. It's just not as necessary. But in general, the point I would make about shotguns, I would probably say that I would always take the shotguns over the bolters, but your mileage may vary. Each person's individual, hey, maybe you built your guys up with bolters already, you want to use them as bolters, that's fine. Either one has utility for objective camping, and the thing that's really cool about the cheap guys is they can even save your more valuable Marines via the Battle Brothers tactic for 1 CP. If you've ever seen Tau drones do savior protocols, this is a similar thing, where a nearby big gun gets shot and you can save him because you instead allocate that damage off onto a 10-point scout. The scout takes a mortal wound, and the Marine you wanted to save is fine. Now that's the basic loadout covered. Usually it's going to be a basic scout or a basic bolter if you're trying to keep things cheap and go 10 points. We'll talk about the combat knife in a minute, but another popular weapon loadout that I wanted to talk about for the scouts is the sniper rifle and camo cloak. Note that a scout with sniper rifle must take the camo cloak, so it's actually 2 points increase in cost, bringing the total to 12 points. The sniper rifle, it's kind of the opposite of the shotgun. Where the shotgun could run all over and still shoot, the sniper rifle, it really wants to hold still, since even making a normal move puts a -1 to hit penalty on your gun in the shooting phase. The trade-off is the weapon's long range of 36 inches, making it to where it doesn't necessarily have to move that much, and the fact that the weapon never takes a penalty for being long range, even if the target is outside the 18-inch half range. Another interesting feature of the sniper rifle is any wound roll of 6-up causes a mortal wound to the opponent, in addition to other damage inflicted by the shot. Now I have to give a quick addendum here because that additional mortal wound sells a lot of people on the weapon. Whenever I see somebody running scouts and we kind of chat about Astartes and their lists, that seems to be one of the reasons people like to take them. Hey, they can sit back, they can shoot, and if I get 6s, it gets a mortal wound. I would just like to kind of say, keep in mind that a lot of things in Kill Team only have 1 wound, and once a model is reduced to 0 wounds, any other allocated shots or damage is lost. So this weapon is a bit odd, since the mortal wound potential wants to shoot versus models with 2 or more wounds, but it doesn't have any AP, and that lack of AP on this weapon means things with multiple wounds, they're usually equipped to make saves versus just a standard strength 4 weapon, and this is only getting 1 shot. And sure, hey, that tough model, it wouldn't get to save against the mortal, but the injury roll on 1 wound models ignores the in addition. So there's that, and then there's a lack of the AP, the single shot at strength 4, all of this kind of combined makes me feel that the weapon is inefficient versus the tougher models. So what you essentially have is kind of like a fishing pole, where you just kind of have that one shot and you're fishing for sixes on the wound roll. But it's not all doom and gloom. Note that there is a potential value build here. It is possibly more of a meme build. I've never taken it in competition or seen anybody even run it, but I did have the idea that you could improve the chance of the mortal going off by making a regular scout with sniper rifle demolition specialist. As a demolition specialist, he then gets +1 to wound versus obscured target. So now he procs that mortal wound on a roll of 5 up. And if you pay 1 CP for the demo specialist tactic custom ammo, you can stack another +1 to wound, making that mortal proc on a 4 up. So now we're at 50-50 odds for that mortal to happen. The Auspex carried by another Marine could help you ignore the penalty for shooting at an obscured model, and a comm specialist can give +1 to hit. So in total, since the sniper rifle never suffers the penalty for long range, you'd be hitting on 2s at +2 to wound, and the wound roll would have a 50-50 chance of dealing a mortal wound rather than a 16% chance. However, like I said, that's still something with a lot of moving parts. I like these sorts of engines, I make them for fun, but they're just not always optimal. I haven't tried this one yet though, so if you have luck with it, let me know. Just know that there might be more efficient ways to spend that 1 CP, there might be a better place to put the demo specialist options, and there might be better places to allocate your comms and Auspex buffs. I just know that some people really like the sniper rifle. The model perhaps, maybe they already bought a box. They want to use at least one of them probably. Maybe it's in your fluff for your team that you have that sniper guy. So even though they're not super efficient, there is a build you can try out and see how it does for you. It's the demolition specialist on that sniper rifle. The main build though that you see with a sniper rifle is on a leader, since the camo cloak gives an additional -1 to hit if he's obscured. That protects your CP farm if you're using it as a leader, and the long range means he can kind of sit back and shoot from relative safety. My problem with that build is how easy it is for that one shot to only hit on something like a 5 up, and there are opponents out there like Admech that ignore obscurity with their omnispexes. They can take 2 in a single list, which completely would negate your -2 in cover, and they'd be shooting at you with, say, plasma or something. This means that your leader sniper scout actually it might not be as safe as you thought in competition. So in general, the sniper rifle and camo cloak, it doesn't get a whole lot of play in more serious games. They can snipe characters in big 40k, but we don't have the same situation in kill teams, so the weapon didn't completely translate to our format at the current time. Things might change in an FAQ someday, we don't know. But this means the most common way you see it, it's taken on a leader, and like I said, the model is then kind of just hidden away, hoping for 5s and 6s while he holds an objective and farms CP, just not the most efficient thing. The next way to load a basic scout is to drop their bolt gun for a combat knife and bolt pistol scout build, resulting in a scout with +1 attack because the combat knife, it's basically a chainsword with another name. This actually has found its way into my rosters from time to time because a scout sergeant already has +1 attack over a standard scout. So in total, with a combat knife, he would have 3 attacks, and as a Space Wolf subfaction, he gets +1 to his hit rolls in melee if he charges or got charged. This makes the end results 3 attacks hitting on 2s. Definitely not a bad little value build for 11 points if you run Space Wolves. One thing to note though, the knife doesn't have any AP and sits at strength 4, making it most useful versus squishier opponents with toughness 3 or a low 5 up or 6 up save that the attack volume, those 3 attacks, can break past just because you're rolling enough dice. So there is some utility to this build. It comes at a good price. It kind of got seen more in the days where back when Arena first came out and things like that, a lot of people were trying to get to 20 model lists. You would see people run just the cheapest thing they could and run for the objectives, crowd the board, and this is where that kind of a build really shined. Recently, we saw a change from the hold 1, hold 2, hold more format in the majority of competitions to hold 1, hold more, kill 1, kill more. So now those squishy bodies kind of became a liability and you're seeing less people run them. So that means builds like this Scout Sergeant with the combat knife, Space Wolves, all that stuff is getting seen a little bit less because he's not needing to counter those kinds of builds as often. Now, the next thing we should cover are the Scout Gunners. This is the main thing that you're going to be bringing. They come in at 11 points, so 1 more point than a normal Scout gets you the ability for up to 2 Scouts to be Gunners. That's right, it's a maximum of 2 here, and these are your cheapest source of heavy weapons in the entire faction. So, if you want a heavy weapon in your list, a Hvy Bolter, a missile launcher, this is typically the first place to go. Now, coming back to snipers, on the Scout Gunners, you can take a sniper rifle and camo cloak, but I don't think it's worth it. You only get so many of these slots due to the max 2. Hey, if you could only have 2 gunners, you want them to be efficient. So due to the Max 2, I see it as a bit of a waste to put that loadout on your main source of budget heavy weapons, but I suppose there is a case for a heavy specialist with sniper rifle for some folks. Because you can't take a heavy specialism on a normal scout, has to be a scout gunner. So then if you put the sniper rifle on him, you can have that heavy and still be able to move and shoot. Like I said, some people really want the sniper rifle just to work, and the heavy spec, it's just not available to the other scouts, only the gunner. It would let you ignore the penalty for moving and shooting the heavy profile weapons, so could be worth it if you're absolutely set on making scout snipers work. But you still cannot advance and shoot, of course. However, you'd get rid of that penalty for the normal move before shooting the sniper rifle, so it is an option. Just kind of wanted to throw that out there in case. However, the scout gunners tend to do one of two jobs. Like I said, they carry that missile launcher or a heavy bolter. Unlike the sniper rifle that has to take a camo cloak, when they equip that rifle, the missile launcher scout gunner has the option to take a camo cloak or not. It's up to you if you want to pay one more point to give them that additional -1 to hit in cover. So if you're in cover, you're obscured, you would be -2 to hit if you put that camo cloak on your missile launcher. The missile launcher has been in my lists off and on from the very beginning. It has two profiles, frag or crack missiles. And do note that these do not count as grenades because it sounds similar. We have frag grenades and crack grenades, and then frag missiles and crack missiles. So what this kind of means is you are allowed to shoot all of your scout missile launchers, even if the name of the ammo can be confusing. Just remember, the rounds that it fires has the same names as types of grenades, but it is not shooting grenades. A lot of people get this mixed up, especially because the Primaris Intercessor's auxiliary grenade launcher does actually shoot grenades, so there have been times when overzealous opponents, for example, tried to call people out, mistakenly thinking that missile launchers were doing the same thing. They are not. Just kind of keep that in mind. The beauty of the missile launcher is their range and versatility. They have a 48-inch range, which is absolutely overkill on the 22 by 30-inch boards we play Kill Team on. What this means is that it's possible to be shooting with a penalty from long-range shots, perhaps, but unless the target is completely out of line of sight, if your scout gunner can see him, no matter where it is on the board, he can shoot at him. That's how long the range is. There's no such thing as being out of range. You can be at long range, but you're not going to be, tiptoeing back just enough to be outside of range like you can with some guns like plasmas and things like that. Now the first round that they get is the frag missile. It fires D6 shots at strength 4 AP0. This is a great option to park in the back ranks and fire as squishy blobs of low toughness and low save models like orcs or tyranids come screaming up at you up the board. Before shooting the gun, you roll a d6 to determine how many shots that gun gets, and if there are enemies within 2 inches of each other, you can actually split shots between them, helping you get the most out of the weapon on rounds where you kind of rolled hot to figure out how many shots you get. So if it's a random determined weapon, you roll a d6 anytime you're going to shoot it for the frag rounds, and depending on what you get, if you roll hot, you can say, oh, okay, well, there's these guys over here who are close enough to split shots. It's probably a good idea to spread like 3 and 3 rather than 6 all on one guy in the turns where that happens. Now, where the frag missile is good against hordes, the same weapon has that ability to be scary for elite enemies like Marines or even the tougher things scattered into the horde teams. So, because not all the things in a horde are going to be squishy. You might have Tyranid Hormagaunts everywhere, but there's also going to be probably Tyranid warriors. Just like orcs, there's going to be orc boys everywhere, but you might also have boss knobs. And for these harder things, or for elite teams, the missile launcher is still good. And that's one of the things I love about this weapon. It saves space in the roster because it's just useful against everything. It can adjust to different matches and even to different models within a match as needed. Now the crack missile is only one shot, so you're going to want that Auspex nearby, but it's strength 8, AP-2, and deals an insane D6 damage. Statistically 3.5, so 3 or a 4 damage. You're taking things out of action if that thing hits. It can one-shot kill pretty much anything in the game, up to 6 dice being rolled on a single injury roll, where all you need is a 4, a 5, or a 6 on any one of those dice. That kind of can seal the deal and take whatever you need out of action as long as it hits. So overall, there's just not enough I can say about the ability this weapon has to shift to the job you need when you need it. I love the missile launcher, and only now in this recent tournament, this was the first time I have ever not had one in my roster. I just played my first tournament without one. Ever since the beginning of the game, I've had them. I've used them as demo specs to buff the frag missile's ability to wound. I've made them sniper specialists to reroll 1 to help it hit. I've used it as space wolves to provide cover for my melee marines as they run in. And holy crap, I've had a lot of luck with it as the salamander subfaction, since that faction gives a free reroll a hit and to wound in every phase. And it can really help push the damage through by making sure that this weapon hits, even though it's only got the one shot. But because of the fact it only has one shot, the takeaway is, whether you're buffing the guy with a subfaction, with a comm specialist, with a sniper reroll, whatever it is, there's a lot out there to help him. He does need some kind of modification, in my opinion, for best use, due to only having that one shot. Since you only get that one shot, it needs to count. And that means he often takes up a specialism, or gets a babysitter, something like that. And that means you're going to need to look at your roster, your game plan, the packet, all of that to see if that's actually viable for you, or if you'd be better off running something else. All right, and lastly, we need to cover the Hvy Bolter. Again, the main draw for scouts in a competitive roster is the heavy weapons that they take on a budget. And the other weapon they can supply your team with is the Hvy Bolter. Coming in with 3 shots base at strength 5, AP 1, and 1 damage, the Hvy Bolter is another backfield gun that wants to park, stay where he is, and reach across the field with an awesome 36-inch range to hit targets as they're coming in to hit you. This is another take-all-comers kind of weapon, in my opinion. While it definitely shines versus hordes, the strength 5 means it wounds elites or hordes on 3s typically. So it kind of makes no difference if it's strength or if it's toughness 4 opponents or toughness 3, strength 5 is going to be wounding them both on 3s. And that kind of, the way I feel about this guy is that its stats are kind of actually deceiving. The AP1 is plenty for shooting at a squishy cultist. If something only has a 5 up or a 6 up save, AP1, it's perfect. Yet a lot of people, because of that, they kind of think that that's the main role for this. But the strength 5 and volume of 3 shots means an elite model might actually need to pass multiple saves, not just one, which gives them a chance to fail. The AP1 takes a 3 up save to a 50-50 chance on a 4 up. So if you've ever had to roll multiple 4-up saves, multiple 50-50 chances, you know it's not a guarantee that you're going to pass them all. So if you get 2 or 3 hits with this thing, odds are they're going to fail one of those saves, and then you're going to get to progress to that injury roll. It just always kind of feels like it's getting to the injury roll if you can convert hits into 2 wounds or so that need to be saved, which means, again, it's going to be strongest with modification, like a buff from your comms model or something like that. Where I think the Hvy Bolter offers something a lot of people don't talk about, though, it's kind of like, unlike the missile launcher, the Hvy Bolter doesn't necessarily need modification the way the missile launcher does. Especially when it's firing single-shot crack missiles, that missile launcher has to have modification. It needs the subfaction of the salamanders, or it needs that comms, or it needs the auspex. The Hvy Bolter isn't really in that same way because it has the volume of shots. It's not just one shot. So the volume of shots are what makes the difference. I'm not saying it's better than a missile launcher. I've run the missile launcher way more often than the Hvy Bolter. But it's because of the fact, of the babysitter or the specialism is optional. So they just kind of do different jobs, yet kind of do the similar job. One can swing a lot harder one way or another and be dedicated anti-horde or anti-elite role with the missile launcher. With the other, the Hvy Bolter, it's going to do one thing decently no matter what it shoots at, even though it's just shooting that same round. It's not dedicated to both, but it can flex between both. It's not the perfect counter one way or the other. Now, where the missile launcher can be a perfect counter, it needs a babysitter badly, or you'll have games where it's kind of in the hands of dice, not your skill. Whereas the Hvy Bolter can benefit from the buddy nearby, or a specialism, or a sub-faction that helps it hit, but it isn't mandatory. So that's kind of the decision-making you'll need to weigh and decide for yourself when considering what to bring. Now, the last thing about the Hvy Bolter is that it gives access to the Hellfire Shells tactic for 2 CP. Now, I won't speak too long on this, but okay, yes, it's an expensive tactic. Let's get that out of the way. I'll say right now, holy crap, 2 CP, what? However, all you need to do is get this gun to hit, and you deal D3 mortal wounds. That's so easy to do with the buffs, and you could tool this in a number of different ways. For example, by potentially making the scout with a Hvy Bolter a sniper specialist to reroll ones to hit. You keep a comm specialist nearby with auspex as well, keep him nearby. Altogether, you could have what I call an engine build that hits on 2s, rerolling 1s, ignoring obscurity, and if the shot hits, you don't need to roll to wound, anything like that, it's just did it hit, deal D3 mortal wounds. Technically, this isn't the only form, the only way to buff all of this, because you could get rid of this sniper specialism and put us, just make everybody salamanders, for example. A salamanders kill team would get value here, since now the sniper specialism wouldn't need to go on the scout. You could put it back on a plasma or something like that, for example. And of course, hey, you might decide 2 CP is just too expensive for those D3 mortal wounds. That's fine too. I just wanted to put this in there so that you know this was out there and available to you. It's something I developed playing Deathwatch and have used quite a bit in both factions when something big needed to die. The original name I called it was the Infernus engine because when I made it, it was for that other faction, the Deathwatch's Hvy Bolter. But people call this all kinds of names now. It's starting to get known. I actually had somebody set this up across from me in the last tournament. So, here's my build, and I see it set up across from me finally. So people call it the Hellfire engine, the Hellfire stack. My personal favorite that I saw online, beer fire shells, because, beernid, beer fire. So basically, guys, I don't use this every time I put a Hvy Bolter on the table. I don't use this every game, but it has served me well when I needed it, and I hope it does the same job for you when or if you need it. Just note that this was made for competitions because I was prepping for LVO a couple years ago at the time that this was discovered. So if you're playing casual, you should probably warn the opponent that you can do this before you start the game, because I've seen this kind of thing in conjunction with some other dirty tricks in a roster absolutely table people by round 2. It can be pretty brutal if some things go your way a few times in a row, some things just kind of line up. Of course, it's not a guarantee, but when you have multiple things like this going on, it can get nasty. So just a warning, if you're playing casual at the friendly local game store and you're trying some of this out, maybe just kind of show the opponent, hey, look, you see this guy, I can pay 2 CP, put some mortal wounds on you. All I have to do to hit, or all I have to do to proc that is to hit. And, oh, by the way, I can buff him to hitting on 2s, rerolling 1s. So that brings us to the takeaways of today's episodes. So what do scouts do? When do we take them? What's the too long didn't read of today's video? Well, you need to know scouts are the cheapest model available, but they have that 4-up save instead of a 3-up save. The melee sergeant is worth a look, especially with space wolves. You take him, you make him a space wolf with the combat knife, bolt pistol. This was great for me when people used to run 20 model lists of cheap, easy to kill bodies. Hey, it was 11 points and I had 3 attacks hitting on 2s. But the change to hold and kill formats in 2020 means you see this less often because, everything that people are putting on the table isn't the perfect counter anymore. Used to be, no matter what faction they were playing, they were trying to get to that 20 bodies a lot of times. That's what people were running. The more elite things stayed home, and that let us build things that were, tooled in to beat them. And, we kind of reliably knew what they would put on the table, and this guy had a heyday back then. Things have changed, but he's still worth thinking about. Another thing that we want to talk about on the TLDR of today's video is I don't like sniper rifles, but if you're set on making one work, try the demo specialist because he can do mortals on a 4-up. Some people really like the leader with the sniper rifle. I don't like it. Some people like the heavy specialism. I kind of think that there's just more efficient places to put that than on a sniper rifle where you're just fishing for 6s still, but now you can move and fish for 6s. Sniper rifles are not the best thing in the game. The problem is that you buy that box to get access to the heavy weapon that's in there, and so you're going to have some a lot of times and be wanting to use them. So like I said, if you're dead set on running a sniper, try it as the demo spec. Let me know how that did for you, because I haven't tried it yet, but hey, 50-50 odds, each wound roll is a mortal wound. It could be interesting. The next takeaway of today's video is that it's the cheapest way to field that Hvy Bolter. And, like I was talking about, remember, Hvy Bolter can do Hellfire Shells 2 CP. It's expensive, but it's there for you. There are going to be multiple big things that just need to die. And with toughness 5 and 6 on the tables post-elites, it can be really nice to not have to roll to wound and for them to get a save or an invuln or anything like that. It's just, did it hit D3 mortal wounds, proceed to injury roll. It's pretty nice. Scouts are also the cheapest way to field missile launchers. But remember, you're going to need a babysitter unless you play salamanders, because that sub-faction can, it helps force the rolls through. You're going to need to weigh the pros and cons there. I do like the missile launcher. I don't take them every tournament, but they regularly do feature in my list. Of course, another thing that we briefly touched on in today's episode is the ability for the scouts to soak wounds and damage off more valuable units through the Battle Brothers tactic. It's 1 CP, and if you've ever seen Savior protocols with the Tau drones, this is kind of the same thing. Somebody shoots your big gun, you say, I don't want big gun to die, I'm going to put this damage off onto the scout. All the damage goes away, becomes a single mortal wound, and you roll the injury roll on that now, so you can CP reroll to keep him alive. Perhaps it's a decent tactic, and so if you have little 10-point scouts around, it's something to keep in mind. They might keep your big guns alive. Just remember, guys, one last thing I want to say: scouts can cramp your roster, especially at the 125 points level. Things get tight. I mean, people think 1 or 2 more bodies, yay, I get to put that on the board, but if you have a dedicated list that really beats Space Marines, and a dedicated list that really beats Eldar, and a dedicated list that really does well against Orcs and Tyranids, those extra 2 bodies add up really fast. And when you can only take a maximum of 20 still, taking extra scouts and mixing sub-factions and different things on the roster can mean that you start having to leave things out. So really, try to just take what is essential for you. Go through, look at what I've been saying in this video, and figure out with your game plan what is essential for you, and don't really take extra scouts that you don't need. And with that, I hope you found this video helpful. Space Marines are such a cool faction, and scouts are an interesting thing that you can play with. There's a lot of versatility and different builds that you can play with. I really like them. I've used them in competition. I'm currently the #1 ranked ITC kill team Astartes player, so I've given a lot of thought to these guys, and this is kind of what I think that you should know if you're getting out and getting ready to set upon your own journey in competitive play. If you did find this video helpful, be sure to consider a like, and be sure to subscribe for notifications when the next video in this series is released. I'm going through every data sheet in the Astartes faction and helping you to get more from your kill teams. So if you want to see when the next video is released, click that subscribe button and the bell icon, and you'll get a notification. If you like this series, or if you see something differently or something that I missed, let me know about it in the comment section. And that's it. This is Bearded 40K, signing off until next time. Wishing you guys all the best.